Morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about change. And we are in a time of a lot of change. And there's some aspects of change that in these times it's important to be thinking about and how we interact with the world around us that's changing. And for some of us, we've had some devastating changes associated with what's going on with the coronavirus. I think the first thing with change that we have to think about is where does it come from? And if you back up and you look at the thoughts surrounding change, some of us are good with change. We adapt to change very well. Others of us struggle with change. And so we think about change and what goes on with that. And within change, there's back behind it, there's a lot of fear of the unknown. So we end up feeling like we lose control of our environment and our choices, and we start to focus on all of the what ifs that are sitting out in the future that we don't know that this change is bringing. So one of the things, as I just address that, and before I move forward, I think it's really important that we look back and not just into the future about the what ifs, but we look back at all of the times that we've experienced change and think about how we got through that. That can sometimes put us a little bit more at ease because it reminds us of the skills that we've had and the experiences that we've had that we've been able to deal with change. We all deal with change differently as well. So there's times where we can look back and think about what is it I did during those times of change that was helpful. There are a lot of things to really take a look at and to keep an eye on when we're going through change. There are behaviors that show up that help us distract from the current situation. And some of these behaviors can be problematic. Sometimes people will get stalled, and some modes of getting stalled might include social media. It might include just spending hours online with no real purpose or goal. And when there is a purpose or a goal, it generally is floating around. We're looking for answers. And a problem with the situation where we don't know what the future looks like or that there's some uncertainty, we're looking for those answers from a rational point of view. From our brains are looking for, how does this make sense? There may not be an answer to that in the moment. And so we have an irrational situation going on where we can't predict necessarily, but our brains want to find, how do I make sense of this? And so then we search and we search and we search and we search for something that may not just exist right now, instead of maybe going back and taking a look at, I don't have control over that answer right now. It may come, but I need to think about what do I have control over. So the distraction piece is a big one, and the different modes that we use to do that. Another one that can show up is just substance use. People making choices with substances that might not be healthy. We might isolate, and isolation is different than what we're doing for this social distancing. Isolation is I might not have any contact with folks. I might really withdraw from those conversations or reaching out, and we can reach out. The nice thing about what we have technologically today is we've got phones and we've got computers, and we can set up contact with people in ways that we can still have that basic human need. Some of us don't like to talk about things that are bothering us, and I get that. Others of us, we do get a lot of gains in talking about just, man, it's just been really stressful. And sometimes you just need to identify somebody that might be close to you to kind of have a quick lead-in conversation, which just might, hey, how's all this going for you? A lot of times when you get past that first initial inquiry, the conversation just kind of flows. For those of us that might not necessarily be comfortable with those kind of conversations, it might be helpful for us to just write it out, and you don't necessarily have to share it with anyone. Or it might be an email that you send to someone. But reaching out however you're comfortable, I think, is important to not isolate. So some of the things that would be important as far as to-dos. When we are going into change, a lot of us have had, maybe we're working from home, maybe we've got school that we're now doing online. Maybe, and that's a big change, going from whether it's taking classes in person to online, whether that's working in person or at home, whether that's, now we've got kids that might be there. There's a lot of change there. So whenever those kind of situations exist, it's important to remember that it's going to take some time for all of us to settle into this, what we would call a new normal, or a new temporary normal. What I encourage a lot of people to do in these times of change is to make a very behavioral plan for what the day looks like. Most human beings operate well under structure. And so if you've ever worked with kids, one of the things that you hear a lot with kids is kids really do well with structure. Well, adults are not all that much different. So we want to create some of that new normal structure for us. Otherwise, we're going to go back to those behaviors that I just talked about a little bit ago, about the isolation and the kind of the wandering online and doing things that might not be healthy. So have a day fairly well planned. Now, some people might look at that and go, that sounds awful. And always remember, there is another end to the pencil. You can erase things and add in things differently, however you see fit that works for you. It doesn't have to be absolutely set in stone, but what it does is it helps us get through our day, be productive, and it helps balance our days out. And what you really want to do with those behavioral plans is step back at after putting it together and ask yourself, is this day balanced? Am I taking care of my mind? Am I taking care of my body? Am I taking care of my social needs and whether it's spiritual or whatever areas that you would have that were in place a month ago, we want to make sure we're feeding those needs. So being able to step back and reevaluate, what does this day look like? If you're a really, really high achiever, you might have everything in that day that's just achieve, and that's not necessarily balanced. You might want to, and we normally know ourselves, and if you're somebody that has a tendency to do that, when you step back, kind of remind yourself, did I put some downtime and some self-care time in there for me? Because that's going to be really needed. I think another thing that is really important that we do is to make a not-to-do list. What are the things that you know about yourself that can lead you to some of those behaviors that might not be healthy, or that you have thought back about change in the past that have created problems? And just where we can get successes from the past, we can also think about, here's some things that I have a tendency to do. It's probably not the best thing when I have maybe too much time on my hands, or a period of time where I'm adjusting to it. So make that not-to-do list. The importance to that is just as important as the to-do list. And I think it gets forgot about. Think about hobbies. Think about this as, is there an opportunity that's here? I can tell you, from a personal standpoint, my family has thought about it this way. What is entertainment going to look like right now? It's changed a lot for us. And so we really had to adjust to that and put some other things in place, knowing we're going to be missing some of the normal entertainment that we had in place. So we need to make an adjustment to that and create some of that for us. And that seemed to go well. I think the other thing is that I would like to share is that in talking to people and what these initial struggles were, what I'm sharing with you today is based upon what a lot of people have expressed in this time of the coronavirus, that it's not necessarily the fear of the virus for everyone, but there's all these tertiary effects that go along with this. It could be worrying about their job or business. It could be worrying about the change in school. So these are some of the things that aren't necessarily the virus itself or getting sick itself, but all of these impacts that it has outside of that and in conjunction with it. And so that was part of the purpose that we thought it would be a good idea to bring up change today. And so good luck with your change making and creating a new normal. And we hope to have more videos out soon about different topics that can be helpful in moving through this national crisis.